Welcome back to Beyond the Headline, everyone, where we discuss the realities of launching, scaling, and investing in a business. I'm really excited you're joining us today because it's a super special feature. I have Natasha Case here, the co-founder and CEO of Coolhaus. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's my pleasure.
Natasha, I've already told all my friends and my family about your amazing journey leading up to this point, but I want you to tell everyone about it and don't miss any of the stops.
Absolutely. So we've been on a very exciting journey here at Coolhaus. In 2009, we had the idea to make ice cream inspired by architecture. To bring awareness to the architecture and design field as recession was setting in. So started baking cookies, making ice cream, naming the combinations after architects. And at that time also, it was a very different era for craft ice cream and small batch ice cream, for crazy ice cream. You see a lot more of that today, but it was more of a frontier back then. And social media, as we know it today, was just taking off. I like to say we grew up with social media, really getting started around the same time. And so we had this crazy idea, and being 25 years old and literally having nothing to lose because we had very little. The only way we could really afford to get out there was we thought, okay, we could buy a food truck, which was basically a beat up postal van that we found on Craigslist for $2,900. We had my personal credit card with a $5,000 limit. No bank was going to invest in 25-year-olds with not enough credit history, and of course, as I mentioned, the recession starting. So we towed the postal van. It was about an hour east of LA where we bought it, so it didn't even drive. It sat in Freya, the co-founder's mom's, off the street in front of her house for a few weeks. It was an eyesore that the neighbors complained about. And we figured out what to do. And we thought Coachella is the perfect event to launch at because we can get in front of a critical mass. And, it's a culturally cool, and all those people are going to come back to LA and they'll know about us. So we managed to convince them to let us in. And, then was the question, how are we going to get to Coachella? So we figured out that if we joined AAA Platinum membership, we got one free 200-mile tow. So the morning of Coachella, we pretended that the truck broke down, even though it never drove in the first place. And they towed us out to the desert and dropped the truck in the campground. They didn't really know where to put us. And, honestly, we just built a kind of, even within that, a cult following. They woke me up at 7 a.m. I had gone to bed at 4. They woke me up at 7 because there was a guy already waiting there with his money, waiting to get his ice cream sandwich. So we knew we had something. And, we basically just from there, we were in the black right away because we spent so little getting there. And it went viral as far as PR and on social media. Freya, on the way back from Coachella, Freya got an email every time we got a new Twitter follower. So she called me because she thought we had been hacked. And I said, no, that's really happening. People were following us literally every other second. So, with those things, we were able to start the business and, hit the ground running and start doing special events and private catering with that first truck in LA.
Before you even got the truck, you were an Imagineer at Disney after studying architecture for 7 years, went to Berkeley and Rome, and had just amazing experiences. And this was the career you're going to go on. So your parents actually had intervention. They're like, Natasha, you spent 7 years doing this. What are you doing making ice cream? And you told them, we're going to look back and laugh on this conversation.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I think I don't blame them. On some level, I had definitely always kind of gone down the path of what was expected, and not in this angsty way. I had enjoyed what I was learning, but I think I really saw the writing on the wall. Not in like a concrete sense, like, okay, we're going to make by 2015 we're going to be making $7 million. I wasn't thinking of it like that, but I thought there's something here. This is going to be big. And even in the tiny little microcosms that I had made the ice cream, or Frey and I had made the ice cream sandwiches for friends or at parties, people just lit up when they saw them. You had that instinctual, like, people are drawn to this concept. So I just, I knew like that I saw ahead and just thought, this is going to be something that will say, well, thank God she just went for it. And also, we limited the risk to some degree. I kept working at Imagineering, and then I worked another job. Freya kept her job for 2 years. So it's not like we threw every egg in that basket. We were as smart about it as we could be, making sure it was a calculated risk, not just like an impulse, throw it all out the window type decision.
One of the things that is so intriguing about your journey too is the way that the connection of food and architecture came to be. You're in a class and one of your professors said, "This looks like a layer cake." And he said it in a negative way. And you said, "Cake is great. Like, that's going to be such an exciting thing." And when I told my mom about that, she was so impressed with the way that you approached the situation. Is that how you approach life, with that positivity?
I do think that's probably a good anecdote for how I view things. There's so many things that at first glance, oh, that's a mistake or that's a negative. But when you embrace that and you own it, it can actually be one of the most empowering things. For example, I love to embrace the imperfect, and not a lot of former architects can do that. Architecture can be about this unattainable perfection. But I also know, especially when it comes to food, there's specs and there's guidelines for the sandwiches and how they should be. But what makes Coolhaus so good is that it's not all exactly industrially the same. Each cookie, it's handmade. The ice cream is scooped, handmade. It all has that kind of personal quality to it. So some people could say the sandwiches are not all looking the same. What's wrong? But I would say that's what makes them unique, and that's what gives it that, special twist that a person was involved in scooping this for you or putting the cookie on the top. So you can always find, I think there's always like a beauty or a hidden advantage in a flaw.
I'm glad that you mentioned that it's handmade and just a little bit of the process that goes into your product. Because something you said that I really admired was that you're never, no matter how big this brand gets, going to sacrifice on the quality of the ingredients that you're producing.
Yes, absolutely. And today you don't have to. That's what's so great. I think I consider myself a kid of the 90s as far as what we saw with food trends and, what grocery stores were really the kind of products and pricing and brands. I think that they were getting behind, back then. And there were a lot of, for example, chef-driven products that just became totally dumbed down once they were more distributed on a mass retail level. And I think for our generation, we found a way. People are a little bit more about you get what you pay for these days. So people are willing to spend that extra dollar to see, oh, this is a cool, happy, excited, passionate young person behind this brand. It's worth my extra dollar. Or, oh, that's where those cows are from that makes the dairy that goes into the ice cream. You've got my extra dollar, whatever it may be. So that's allowed brands like us to go from being a one truck, business to being in what's going to be now 4,000 grocery stores. We have not changed a thing about the recipes. It's all still made in the same handmade way, same ingredients. You just don't have to anymore. So why would you? And that is a really exciting prospect. Like, that's a revolution, it truly is.
You shared before that an insight you would share with Natasha, who had just graduated, so before you threw off the cap, was to draw your vision, literally put it on paper and then work to create it. Now, as you just mentioned the amazing success Coolhaus has had, what does that vision look like moving forward?
I think that one is, continuing now that we have the brand umbrella really in place. Like, these are the things we stand for. These are our values. This is the kind of tastes that inspire us and we think will inspire you. You can do anything. We can do more novelties. We can go outside the frozen novelty category into baked, into butters, into toppings, into milks. I mean, we could go outside of edible into lifestyle, products. And so I think once you have the brand established, the possibilities are endless. So that's definitely one big thing. I think we want to continue to have more brand partners in our world. Coolhaus is a great canvas for other brands to get involved. For example, I don't know if you've seen that Dexter ice cream sandwich that we did for the finale season. So that was an amazing partnership with Showtime. We love doing things like that. We have a custom sandwich for the Forum, which is a huge music venue in LA. So just want to continue to, partner with other brands and see what we can do for them as far as ice cream, and see how they might want to use our brand to innovate. And I think, probably from a business standpoint, we are looking at, we're going to probably raise a private equity round to also get some even more dollars behind it, and really position the brand to be a here to stay national, global brand, where once again we don't change anything about how we make it.
I love it. When it comes to the day-to-day, I know you like to spend 50% of your day away from the computer in R&D, business development, working on everything. So today, what was your day like when you weren't at the computer?
So I always like to do something active if I can during the day. This morning was tennis. Freya and I are very avid tennis players. We do have a lot of like extracurriculars at night too. Like we're in with Coolhaus, we're in a bowling league at the spare room.
This is so cool.
It's super fun. They sell our ice cream sandwiches there, so we always buy the winner of the match a sandwich, one of our sandwiches. We're in a basketball league. We're going to join this really cool billiards club downtown. So always having those active things. Today was tennis. I always eat breakfast. Also, I don't always eat lunch. The day just rushes by, but I always eat a good breakfast. This morning I had a call with a CPG company, a consumer packaged good company that wants to do. We're working on a really big partnership with them, using one of their ingredients to make a new product that is going to be potentially in a lot of sports venues and at
Your wrapper is edible.
Yeah. Yes, the wrapper. Yeah. Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah. The wrapper. Yes, and we can brand the wrapper, which is very cool. I had my women-owned. We applied to be a women-owned business certification. We had to renew it, and so my auditor came today, and I told her all about the business and gave her a tour. I have meetings with my team. I have a little design work that I have to do, and then I'll go home and move into our new house.
I'm glad that you mentioned each of those things, because it really demonstrates how crazy life is as a founder. You have to have your hand in everything, and you described it in probably the best way I've ever heard it described, as really a transcendental intoxication. So if you don't have that, the idea will just remain an idea. Tell us about that and what it feels like throughout the day, because you love this. There's nothing else you'd rather be doing.
Yeah. I think, finding, I read something about our generation, which I think is very true, which is, I think and not to say that we don't still want work-life balance, but I think work-life balance was kind of the quintessential goal of like maybe the baby boomer generation. And our generation wants that too, but there's also something about not knowing the difference between work and life, and how that's so appealing, I think, to a lot of brands and companies now, that you create a brand and a company that is a lifestyle for people that they always want to be talking about and celebrating and getting behind. And I think it's that intoxication. It gives you a kind of high, because you're spending, how many hours a day do we spend working? So many. This is going to be a big part of your life. You want to be able to spend those hours with something that when you go home at the end of the day, or when you're out at night and someone says, "What do you do?" and you can tell them something that you get excited about, that they get excited about. That's the best.
You just mentioned the feeling of, seeing someone try Coolhaus or signing up for the program because they love it so much that they want to have it every month. It lends to an excellent insight you shared, that you never want a customer to feel left out of your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's like a life value for me. I hate feeling like an outsider. I hate that feeling. And I know when I created my brand, I want to be a place where no one's an outsider, and in fact, you're cooler by association, and that to me is just the way things should be. Knowledge should be open and inclusive. Really a big part of the impetus with starting was like, I just felt like in design school, we were so in a bubble with our terminology and with some of the presentations I would see. And I was just like, this is really exciting, but people feel intimidated to be part of this and they don't feel connected to it. And so that's just always been a goal. Like no one, you're never going to be successful if people feel like they can't access on some level. Everyone wants to be part of something. That's great. So I just that's just a fundamental kind of life philosophy for me, and I think that that's part of the reason why ice cream in particular has been so great. It has such a broad appeal, and everyone's just happy when they're having it, and who can complain about that?
I know that same mentality applies to your team, and you shared in a previous interview that one of the things that surprised you about running Coolhaus was how much you loved leadership. Tell us about your culture, and like you said, when you go in and people are playing music and they're baking.
Yeah, I realize sometimes I wear a lot of different hats. I mean, I do the design, I do the I lead budget meetings. I oversee a lot of the sales and the marketing and social media plans and all of those things. But kind of like a huge part of this job, if you're gonna be a business owner, is you kind of are the motivational speaker for your company and kind of the therapist. And that's you definitely have to love that if you're going to do this. And I think I just realized like I just love to get people excited and get people to my level of excitement, and that's something I could just do 24/7. And I think when you grow a business, it's about executing idea, creating things, but you also just become such a pliable a pliable being, because you always have to evolve. You have to be able to cope with trauma and then like extreme excitement. It's just there's so much. So you kind of have to what's the like the threshold for your cup of water has to be kind of infinite. And then you learn, is this something for me or isn't it? And there's really only one way to know, which is to do it.
Navigating all of the different turns on the roller coaster, what were some of the biggest challenges?
I think managing people, anyone would say, is one of the hardest. When we started the business, we were pretty young, 25, and we were the same age, if not younger, than some of our employees. And it's can be challenging for them to take you seriously or to have proper boundaries, to know when is being friends or being friendly, the right way to go. And so I think that just takes time, learning how to motivate people, what motivates them, how to hold them accountable, how to put systems in place that make sense for people to follow. These are all things that they take a minute. And also just like, I sort of needed the time to grow up in my own business, because as you just do get older. Now I'm 32, and for my younger employees, we may have as much as more than a decade apart. And it's kind of nice to have that. They're seeing you as someone at a slightly different stage of life, and you kind of have that a little bit of that maturity distance, which is a good thing. Definitely is helpful.
I'm glad you mentioned the dynamic of being friendly, especially when you're close in age. For the young founders who are where you were back when you started, what advice do you have for them?
I would say, don't beat yourself up about it. Be patient. Embrace what's good about being younger and inexperienced, because I like to say you can walk through a wall when you don't know it's there, which is a very true statement. When you're so aware of the risks and you know so much about a world, you could be risk averse and you could overthink things. And when you just kind of go for it, you may not even realize all the rules you're breaking. But that can be great, So use the naivete as an advantage, but then also know that you don't want to reinvent the wheel. Be open to mentors from the outside. Have conversations with your peers. Just give yourself all the tools to help you learn as quickly as possible and to help you evolve at the best you can.
In that light, what's a leadership insight that you've learned and that's commonly told that you think is a myth that hasn't worked for you?
That hasn't worked?
Hasn't worked.
Um, hmm. I think that there is a myth that everyone's motivated by money, and I do think some people are, but some people, it's not really the money that's going to make them do it. It's some people just really need to be told, like, you're doing a great job. It may seem obvious, but you need to take the time to say that and to thank them. So there's a lot of different ways, you know. And I would say also that some of the gender stereotypes, you know, I find with emotions, it can be interesting. I think that you know, I think that men are good at asking for more, and I want to see more women ask for more. But I also have seen men be much more emotional, actually, and you know, than women, which I think is usually people would think the opposite. So things are more complicated than they may seem, you know, as far as what you may experience on that standpoint. Um, but yeah, I think you have to learn a lot of these lessons for yourself, really.
So as a founder, then does it make you have to be like hyper aware, like you said, as a therapist, of how everyone's feeling?
I think you do. I think you have to really be insightful. It helps for me. I'm definitely a people person, and I like to, you know, really kind of tap into how people are feeling about a situation or a new task, or you know, do I need to be supportive? Do I need to kind of let them, you know, fly with this one? There's so much of that, and that's a huge part of your job at the top you know, is initiating that vibe or that culture. It's a big soft skill.
What are some ways that you achieve that?
I think some of it takes time. I think observing others and how they work, talking about it. I always think it's important, you know, going to events where you hear about other entrepreneurs talk about their experience, reading articles. LinkedIn has a lot of great editorial, for example. So really just trying to educate yourself. I even think some TV shows where they show a business person or a boss, you know, obviously some of the scenarios are stereotyped, but there's often a lot of truth, you know, to some of the office politics. Um, you know, I think even, for example, I think like The Good Wife. That's a good example. You know, there's seeing the way they interact with each other at the office. You could learn some interesting lessons. The main character, I'm such a fan of Juliana Margulies, and her character, for example, always takes time to stop and thank people when they do a good job. You know, yeah, it's a TV show, but are there interesting lessons to be learned about how to manage people? Totally. And then you can also have an excuse to watch a good TV show.
While eating ice cream, that is not bad.
Hey,
When I hear you say that, Natasha, it's so clear that learning is just a part of your DNA. You're constantly observing and getting better. What's something you've learned recently that's really stuck with you?
um, I think, let's see. I will say that actually that point about culture and how businesses that have the best culture are the ones that really last. I also think there's a difference between being, you know, financially successful, whether as an individual or as a company, and having a voice and power. I think that the latter is much more interesting. You know, yes, financial success is a great measure of success, but what's the impact you're making on people? You know, have you changed how they view eating dessert or ice cream, or what a brand can be about, or what a brand can look like? Those are things that in the end, they will also, I think, lead to more financial power, but they are kind of indirect because they're more about influence, which I think is such a I don't know, more interesting and abstract way to have access to people and to feel successful.
What have you learned about people throughout this process?
Um, what have I learned about people? I've learned about people that they like to, if you give people, I think people need kind of a combination of structure, but also freedom to be themselves. And that's when you can be your best self. Like, it's really nice to have, it's hard if you don't feel like there's anywhere to put your feet, but once you have somewhere to put your feet, like then you can run and dance and jump, and letting people run and dance and jump. So you have that balance of like bohemian, but also maybe corporate structure. I really see that on a lot of levels, that's like a very good, like kind of universal human desire.
What have you learned about getting people to open up about that more relaxed side of them that wouldn't traditionally come to the office?
Um, I think that, having activities outside the office, like the bowling league, we went to karaoke,
Oh,
um,
karaoke's a tough one.
except if you have like a huge amount of musicians who
True.
with your trucks and shops, and
Valid.
they're so happy to get on the mic and sing like John Legend. So doing things outside the office, taking time to know people and their passions outside the office, it doesn't all have to be about, office culture.
For you as CEO, too, you explained previously, and it really stuck with me, that when you're at the top and you're leading everyone, very rarely do people come pat you on the back and say, hey, great job for getting that project done. So that places you in the position of having to know, here's my goal, here's when I'm going to have achieved it. How do you approach that? Because it doesn't sound easy.
Yeah, I think in some ways running a business is it can be a thankless job. Not everyone's going to realize like, oh, I should also tell my boss that when they do a good job, like, wow, great job. That's not necessarily something that's um, obvious or may not even be appropriate. You have to kind of navigate that in the right way. Um, but that's why having partners is good. I think you tell each other, you give each other a high five. We do also have a chairman of the board who I'm accountable to. He's not official. He's more of a mentor coach, but he is someone who's at our budget meetings, and he'll tell us, oh, great job, well done, or we need to work on this. So there's definitely that. I think also when you're the owner, you also get a lot of credit for the successes or, for a failure of the company. So there are outside acknowledgments, absolutely. But, even in that case, I think if you get something, it's important to thank your team because they're a huge part of what made that possible.
Let's say it's an ideal day and you're having ice cream for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Which three Coolhaus flavors would you have?
Let's see, breakfast, maybe go brown butter candied bacon,
Okay. That's acceptable. We're good. One
right?
for one.
Lunch, I would say maybe whiskey Lucky Charms, late lunch, or maybe dirty mint chip, keep the breath fresh all day. Fresh mint leaves, really good. And then maybe the dinner, then do the boozy one, the Maker's Mark Manhattan. That one's so good.
All
Never
very acceptable.
good.
Last question goes back to your Berkeley days, and you said that you used to leave class thinking, maybe I can change the world. Have you kept that inside of you?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think Berkeley and the Bay Area, in a way that it can be a little bit of a bubble, where there's so many liberal politics and so many cutting edge. Yes, I mean technology. It's amazing what's come from there. Obviously, food. It's been so much of it, the innovation, and really, I think setting the tone for the rest of the country. And in some ways, that bubble can be a feeling to escape the bubble. On the other hand, it's like you almost have this little magical world where you really do, and it's true, think anything is possible. I remember one of my professors saying, like, it was one of the first times I think I really heard in an educated way. I really heard in an educated way that she believed, it fully nonviolence. It should never be necessary. There should never be war. There's always another way. And I remember thinking like, wow, of course. Like why not? Why do we have to resort to violence? And so I think that it is a little bit of like I said, it's like a microcosm up there, but you can take the really empowering thoughts and the really revolutionary messages out of that bubble and apply them in the rest of the world. And absolutely, that has stayed with me from my Berkeley days, feeling like you can make fundamental changes and that like the earth is craving people to try to, be revolutionary and push the envelope and take risks. So I'm really glad that I had that privilege and that opportunity to feel empowered in that way, in school. That's always going to be a part of what I do.
My God, that was a quotable. That was a good one. We got to end right there then. Natasha, I can't thank you enough for being here and for doing the work that you do. How can everyone stay up to date with you and also get their hands on some Coolhaus?
Yeah. So you can come to eatcoolhaus.com. We've got a lot of information there where our retailers are, how to book our trucks, all of our menu items, press, news, blog, etc. You can follow our handles. Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook is at Coolhaus, or the local feeds at Coolhaus LA, at Coolhaus New York, at Coolhaus DFW. And then find us local retailer near you, or if you're in LA, Texas, or New York, one of our trucks or shops, we'd love to see you there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.